Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar. I hope you're safe and well wherever you are based right now. So today's webinar is sort of COVID-19, what we know and what we don't know about the virus so far. And I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by Dr. Ruth Milton. So Dr. Ruth Milton is a physician specialised in public health with local, regional, national and international experience. She's worked as a Director of Public Health in primary care trusts and local authorities too. She currently works in the Health Protection Medical Directorate of Public Health England as a Senior Medical Advisor. Her remit there includes advising and supporting government departments on their planning and preparedness for emergencies, as well as acting in this role during emergency responses. Amongst other international responsibilities, she acts as the UK representative on the NATO Health Group for Civil Emergencies. And during this response to COVID-19, she has been the Public Health England representative linking to various government departments, in addition to having a senior role within PHEs on incident response structure. So delighted to say, joined by Dr. Ruth Milton there. Also in the wings, if you like, is Tim Thomas, who is Director of Employment and Skills here at Make UK. And I know Tim's got a number of questions which members have been raising, and we'll chip in, no doubt, with those questions as we progress. Just before we kick off, just some housekeeping rules. So there's quite a lot of us on today's session, as you can imagine. So the lines are mute. If you've got any questions, do feel free to pose those questions in the chat box, which you should be able to see in the corner of your screens right now. This webinar has been recorded as well, I should say, and a copy of that recording would be made available afterwards. So look, without further ado, I'll hand you over to Ruth.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. I am, as you've heard who I am, so I'm just going to very briefly say a little bit about PHE, then talk about COVID-19 primarily, and where we might be going, and happy to address any of the issues that I may have missed. So I will carry on. So Public Health England, we're the Public Health Agency for England. So technically it's an executive agency of Department of Health and Social Care, but there's quite a lot of autonomy in many ways, and PHE hosts national specialist functions as well as regional offices for local working, and we cover the breadth of public health issues, which is health protection, which is what we're really focusing on today with regard to infectious diseases, but we do all hazards. So and so that's everything from climate change to the impact of chemicals, as well as infections. So if it affects people and populations, we're involved. And so yes, we were very busy during Salisbury incident. We do health improvement, which is, you know, your healthy lifestyles, and don't smoke, eat sensibly, and remember the poly pill, which is exercise. Healthcare public health, which is all the evidence-based interventions for healthcare. And we're quite explicitly an evidence-based, scientific based organisation. And even though we're a government agency, we do have considerable components of our staff who are specialist scientists, and many people doing both basic research as well as quite a bit of operational research. So that's a little bit about us. And our headquarters currently is just across the road from Waterloo Station in London, but we have a number of other buildings. So what's our role with regards to this new coronavirus infection, COVID-19? We first came across it, as did many other people, right at the back end of December, and we do a daily trawl of all the international communication about infections and incidents going on from a public health perspective. to look at we call it our epidemiological intelligence function, and it came up right at the back end of December that that there was something going on in Wuhan in China. We actually raised it as something of serious implications after the first week in January, and have been running it as a national response for a public health perspective since the 8th of January. So we did take it very seriously very early on. But what did we do, and what did that involve? Well, it involved actually trying to learn more about it, identify who was at risk and who might be unwell with it, and also not only learning more about it, but actually taking forward how we could identify it in the UK. So following work on other coronaviruses, so SARS and MERS are coronaviruses as well, our specialist labs had developed a PCR test for sort of generic coronaviruses, and they were able to make that or develop that into a COVID-19 one relatively quickly, and that has been subsequently further developed with a lot of international collaboration between the various different labs. We have at our local levels health protection units, which do support a lot of the local responses. So if we go right back, some of you may remember the case that was all over the media of some guy who'd been to a conference in Singapore, gone skiing in France, and then came home to the south of England. So our teams, our local team, basically went in and supported, identified, and helped with the contact tracing for that. And we actually had a national team that went in to give them some specialist support. And we do know from the whole genomic sequencing, actually, that that case didn't actually, that particular infectious route didn't actually expand into England at all. It's quite interesting. PHE also, as the National Public Health Agency, provides advice to the government and to all government departments, and works very closely with the NHS through Department of Health and Social Care and NHS England. I guess it's probably worthwhile just pausing briefly to mention devolved administrations at this stage. So each, you may be aware that each of the devolved administrations has its own public health function because health is devolved. We do work very closely with them, and to the extent that we talk with our colleagues in the devolved administrations at least once a day. I mean, they join one of our daily meetings as routine, and if we need to have further conversations, we do. So there is very close collaborative working, and with regard to areas where England and the government has functions that aren't devolved, it's PHE that takes the lead responsibility around supporting that, but working again with our devolved administrations. I've put at the bottom of this slide what PHE doesn't do. Oh, there's loads of stuff across the media that's saying PHE hasn't done this, PHE hasn't done that. It's usually because it wasn't our job. But there you go. So if I come on to COVID-19, which is far more interesting than the organisation I work for. Why is it called COVID-19? So this is the infection, and the virus is called SARS-CoV-2 because that is just the WHO nomenclature. No, nothing more, nothing less. It's a family of coronaviruses which are both human and animal viruses. On exposure, it can take up to about 14 days to get infected. Most people seem to be 4 to 6 days. And it's usually from person to person by respiratory droplets. It can be from person to surface to person. And that is usually a hard surface rather than clothing, for example. So when we first set out, we thought that everyone who got infected probably became symptomatic. And of course, that's not the case. But when you're symptomatic, you will be most likely to be infective to others for those first few days of symptoms. But it also seems that people can be infective for the day or day and a half before they become symptomatic. And particularly in younger people, it seems that the infection tends to be far less severe. It's probably worthwhile mentioning that with the symptoms, new cough, fever, loss or change of taste or smell, couple of things here. The raised temperature, the fever, is not often the presenting symptom. And in the people that have it, it's probably only about half the people that have it. Therefore, taking people's temperatures as a screening method is not the best thing that one could be. Well, it's better, potentially better than nothing, but it could be worse because it could be misleading. The other thing to say is that, as with other viral infections, the cough can persist after recovery. And I've mentioned about some people not having any symptoms at all. So the transmission risk of infecting other people, you can consider it just using a sort of straightforward risk time hazard type exposure type methodology. So it's how much virus is present, how long are you exposed to it for, and what is the method of exposure. And so given, and this is where the various things like is 1 meter enough, is 2 meters enough comes in, because it is around that. But I think I will come on to that a bit later, if that's okay.
Yeah, Ruth, sorry to interrupt you mid-flow. If I think there's a couple of questions just on that slide in particular. I think, yeah, if I bring Tim in at this point. Tim.
Thanks, Roger. Ruth, can you help? I know from speaking to our members, there have been a lot of consideration on temperature testing, whether they should offer it, whether they should require it of their workers, whether it's a guide, an indication that someone could be infected with COVID-19. You just said that temperature testing could be misleading.
Yeah.
I know some members have even gone to the extent of researching and investing in equipment to take the temperatures of their workers. I know one member that's taking temperatures of their workers twice a day. Could you perhaps help us out and help our members out? You said the temperature testing could be misleading. Is it something you think our members should be offering or even requiring of their workers? And how do they treat the results of that temperature testing? And what do they do with the information that they then get?
Okay, gosh. So, okay, if I start a little bit with the efficacy of taking people's temperatures, of thermal monitoring, and then a little bit about the benefits of using it to identify whether or not someone should be at work. So you have surface temperature of the body and core temperature, and if you're doing thermal imaging, that's not necessarily going to pick anything up. It'll just tell you whether or not something's hotter or cooler. to actually get and to take a core temperature, the best way to actually take a temperature is with one of the with an oral thermometer, the sort of thermometer you use in the ear. That's the most reliable way of doing it. So that's probably the first thing to say. The second thing to say, does it pick up whether or not your workforce should be at work? Well, if somebody has a raised temperature, they're probably unwell and probably shouldn't be at work. It doesn't mean they've got COVID-19. A raised temperature does not mean they are unwell with COVID-19. As I said a little while ago, probably only about half of people who are infected with it actually have a raised temperature, and it is not always the first symptom that's found. So, which doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. So, having said that, if you've got a raised temperature, you know, just to repeat, you probably shouldn't be at work anyway, because you're probably ill with something. So it is, I don't think it's not something that we would be able to say in Public Health England is any way diagnostic of any particular infection. It can suggest, if used effectively, that there is something, you know, that person is unwell. People can bypass it if they choose to by taking something to lower their temperature knowingly, such as paracetamol. So it's not the most reliable thing to use, which probably doesn't answer your question, but that's kind of the situation.
It does. Thank you, Ruth. So I think what we're saying is the temperature testing that some of our members are offering to their workers, it sounds like it's part of the mix, but it's not definitive that someone has COVID-19. It means they're probably ill with something, so treat them in that way. But then it sounds like they can't make the instant jump to this is COVID-19. No,
absolutely not. But also, I guess, you know, doing that sort of thing, it makes people stop and think a bit. So it may have other benefits.
Thanks, Ruth. Thanks for the question, Tim.
Shall I carry on?
Please do. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I was going to go on a little bit to looking what do we know internationally, and I've just put up some indicative. Have no apologies if they're a little bit out of date, but WHO has a whole part of COVID-19, and it has a dashboard, and you can look to see what's happening. This actual one is, I do have to say that even since then things have progressed. So it is worth being aware that of the international picture, particularly for companies that have overseas links, I'm sure, because you can. I mean, we've heard about Brazil in the media quite a lot, and how they've stopped counting cumulative cases. Their numbers are increasing, even though they're not counting cumulative cases, they're counting daily cases. And of course, that's not going to be all of them. That's just the ones they know about. And they are increasing quite dramatically on a daily basis. So Brazil's not in a good state at the moment, as are several of the other South American countries, quite high numbers, but everything is dwarfed by the numbers in Brazil. The state in Russia is not great at the moment, state of COVID. Numbers seem to be increasing far quicker than they were until recently on the Indian subcontinent generally. And I think with Africa, I think the short answer is we don't know what we don't know, because there's not that much testing in many countries, although there has been a suggestion that because of people's lifestyles and the predominantly far younger average age of the population, it may not be such an issue, but I don't think we can say that definitively. But the international picture is changing, and looking at the numbers this morning briefly, It's not great in some places. Europe seems to be generally quietening down. But that is available on WHO website for anyone who wants to look. Looking at what's happening in England, Public Health England is working with a number of other, with a couple of other government agencies and with various academic units, primarily Cambridge MRC. We're also working, I think, with Manchester and several other places. And there's been a modelling function that PHE has been coordinating from this since January. This is not what we're hearing from Imperial and Neil Ferguson. It's complementary to it. Although it's modelling, it is using the daily number feeds in to inform those models. So it's not just a model. It is a model using the real situation. Okay, so it's relatively well informed. And this is from the Cambridge MRC website of what the number of new infections look like, just to give you an indication of that. And then if we go on to the next slide from this website, which some of you may have seen already, this is looking at deaths, and the red points are the real numbers from the daily reporting. And I suppose two things to say here. One, yes,